Let's turn to Israel and the war in Gaza. We've had some very emotive debates involving you and many other people. See, nothing's changed on the ground. Perhaps the world's attention is less obsessively now and there than it was. What is your take on where we are with this war?
Yeah, so today we read that Israel's going to start to withdraw a little bit from Gaza. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. Israel has been brutal. They've now killed about 20 times the number of people that Hamas did. I don't believe that a state is immune from charges of terrorism or genocide.
We've argued a lot about this. Between going after ISIS in Iraq and Syria and eradicating pretty much ISIS, but in the process killing a lot of civilians, and what Israel is now doing with Hamas, where they believe they've killed maybe as many as 10,000 Hamas terrorists, which is maybe a third of the total. I mean, I call them terrorists because I believe there's no other way to describe what they did on October the 7th.
That's no problem. And I would argue that Israel is taking terrorist action.
In your eyes, morally, between the deaths of civilians when the world went after ISIS, in places like Iraq and Syria, and what's happened in Gaza?
So there's a couple of really, really important differences. So number one, America, even when we were going after ISIS, even when we were bogged down in Mosul in the biggest guerrilla warfare we've ever seen within a city, never dropped a bomb bigger than 500 pounds because we thought that's a war crime. We can't go above 500 pounds because that's indiscriminate killing of civilians. Israel is dropping 2,000-pound bombs, and a lot of them are unguided. What that means is, I don't give a damn who it kills. I don't care if it's a terrorist, which by the way are mainly under the tunnels. What I laughed at was the idea that they killed 10,000 Hamas fighters.
Right, we don't know.
We don't know, but no one believes that.
I challenged the Israeli spokespeople many times. They don't actually know any of those stats, right? They believe that may be the kind of ballpark figure. It's not been denied by Hamas, so you have to assume it might be correct.
Yeah, so first of all, IDF has shown through their own videos that the tunnels are largely intact. We know Hamas is in the tunnels, so all logic and evidence indicates that they barely got any Hamas fighters. Okay, whatever, you've got Israeli propaganda, you got Hamas propaganda, but there's no question, everyone agrees, the great majority of the people killed were innocent civilians, children and women, largely. So now in the ISIS case—
And it's been horrific. I mean, there's no two ways about it. When you see these scenes from Gaza, the obliteration of northern Gaza, the same now going on in the south, the fact that Gaza's population is half children, the sheer volume of children being killed on a daily basis is utterly horrendous. This has been a question I've raised many times from the start of this war, is after what Hamas did on October the 7th, what is morally justifiable in terms of a response by Israel? And I don't have the answer. I'm just curious what you think it is.
So number one, it is not indiscriminate killing of civilians, and that is almost certainly what we had in Gaza. 85% of Gazans are now homeless because 70% of the buildings are either destroyed or damaged. So what they did was one of the biggest war crimes we've ever seen in our life. That is not a proportional response. We had plenty of war crimes on our hands too, as America executed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but nothing on the scale of what Israel has done. To give you a sense of it, we killed less civilians in 20 years in Afghanistan than Israel killed in 2 months in Gaza. So they dropped 29,000 bombs in a city the size of Las Vegas. The sheer terror of that is indescribable. So you send in special forces, you do something. But most importantly, this goes to your question about how is it different than ISIS and how to resolve it. ISIS doesn't represent anyone. ISIS doesn't represent an ethnic group. They claim they represent a religious group, but they're radicals and they don't represent Muslims at all in general, right? But Hamas is fighting a war because of the occupation. And the occupation of the Palestinians is untenable. So every day that you have an occupation, you're going to have a resistance.
And it's undeniable that there's been an occupation.
Yeah.
And we know that because when this latest war started, the fact that Israel was able to turn on the taps of energy and water, fuel and so on, the fact they could do that, stop the food coming in and out, that is what an occupation involves. It means you control somewhere, which is not legally yours to control, and you're controlling it. So I don't think you can argue, whoever side you come down on this, you can't argue against the idea that there's been occupation, nor can you argue that a lot of the more right-wing members of Netanyahu's cabinet, some of whom are extreme, far-right people, that they have no concern about what is happening and would be quite happy to see all 2 million Palestinians gone. And they would love to just take that land. Now, that's also undeniable, which is one of the reasons why Netanyahu has dug himself into a very difficult position politically, I think.